Hello and thanks for watching this video. I'm sorry about the poor lighting. I'm doing this on Monday evening, Labor Day, and I can leave for Washington tomorrow, so I need to get this done tonight. I'm sorry about the shadows on my face. Hopefully you'll be able to see the whiteboard. First, a couple of things about this little video is going to be a follow-up on the first lecture, and then I'm also going to post a second video with regard to the second lecture, the one that would have happened on September 4th, except for I will not be in class September 4th, so we're going to have a little YouTube video instead. But that's not what this is. This is the follow-up to the first lecture, a couple of additional things that I wanted to cover. So first of all, if you look at homework 2, you'll see that the first question has to do with an article that I've posted on Husky CT. And I've asked you to read the whole article. There's lots of ideas in the article. Don't worry if you don't understand them all. We won't be covering them all even in the entire semester. But for those of you who are going to be continuing on in your economics education, you might want to keep this article handy just as a reference for some of the major ideas that you'll be studying. In particular, though, for homework 2, there is the specific questions about the definition of economics. And I don't think you'll find the questions that I ask on the homework too hard to figure out once you look at the article. And as you look at the article, you'll see that there is a lot of disagreement about the definition of economics, but I would just like to emphasize there's a great deal of agreement among economists on certain principles, principles that we discussed last week, meaning that resources are scarce, that the real cost of something is what you must give up to get it, that people respond to incentives, and many of the other principles. So while definitions we can argue over, and there'll be certainly other issues that economists will argue over and do argue over, there's also a great deal of agreement, particularly on many of the basic principles that we discussed in class. The other thing I would say about that is that economics isn't necessarily a set of ideas about which a certain number of people agree with, but it's a way of thinking, and it's a way of thinking about a wide variety of problems, from growth to auctions to crime to religion, and many others. Taking the particular ways of thinking that economists use to approach those different problems can bring about some very interesting conclusions. Anyway, that's a general introduction really to the entire course and really the entire field of economics. Specifically, there were a couple of things that I wanted to discuss last week and just ended class before we got to them. And the first one is one very simple model of the entire economy and of the way that microeconomics works, and we call that the circular flow diagram. And the circular flow diagram has some very simple elements. One, we have the households. And we have the firms. And then we have the markets for goods and services. And we have the market for factors, the factor markets. Now, I'm hoping you'll be able to see the board. If you can't, don't worry too much. I have posted slides where there's a very nice illustrations of the circular flow diagram and everything else I'm going to be drawing up here tonight. But the idea is that the households like stuff, and so they go to the market for goods and services, and they get the goods and services that they want to consume. And the way that the goods and services got to the market is that the firms produced the goods and services and brought them to the markets for goods and services. And the way that the firms were able to produce the goods and services is they took the factors, the land, the labor, the capital, the resources that we discussed last week. They take the factors and they put them together to produce the goods and services. And then the real question is, well, where did the factors come from? Well, the factors actually come from the households. The households bring the factors to the factor market. Now, the biggest factor that the household brings is labor. So the household brings itself, or part of itself, or some members of itself, to the factor market to sell its time, its labor, into the factor market, which is then used by the firms to produce the goods and services, which are brought to the markets of goods and services, and then back up to the households. The households also have some savings that they are going to set aside and put into the bank, and those are going to be used to purchase the capital. The households themselves at some point own all of the land, and that is available for rent to those that are going to use the land. So the household is actually the source of the factors that go from the factor market into the firms that uses those factors to produce the goods and services that get back to the households. Now, so all of this is all about sort of the real stuff moving around, and of course there's something else that's moving the other direction, which you can guess probably by now is money. So the reason that the household is able to get the goods and services from the market is the household has brought some money to the market. And so in exchange for money, the household is going to get the goods and services. And the firm is bringing those goods and services to the market for goods and services in exchange for money. And the firm has to pay money into the factor market. We're going to call that the wages, the rent, the interest on the capital. The firm has to pay that into the factor market, and so the household, for example, is going to get back the wage in exchange for its labor. It's then going to use that money to go to the market for goods and services. So the money is flowing around in this direction, the factors and then the goods and services are moving around in this direction, and so therefore we have the economy. This is the very simple circular flow diagram of the economy. Now, if we were going to make it more complicated, we'd add in a financial system, the banks or the capital markets. We would add in the government to regulate the whole thing. So there are ways to make this whole situation more complicated. We're actually not going to get into too much of that in this entire course, actually. But when you take intermediate classes or maybe other courses where you have to take money in banking or you learn about government regulation of industry, it'll sort of complexify this very simple model. The other concept I wanted to talk about last Wednesday, which I didn't have time for, was this whole concept of positive versus normative. And you can read some very specific definitions of those two concepts in both the slides and in the book. The basic idea is that positive statements are statements that can be either confirmed or refuted by facts. Doesn't mean that they're true. It just means that they have a yes or no answer. So I could say it was 20 degrees below zero in July in Connecticut, and that would be wrong because we had one of the hottest summers on record. But I could say it, and that would still be a positive statement, and then we could go check the fact book and see that it was wrong. But it's a positive statement because it can be either affirmed or refuted based on facts. Normative statements, however, are statements of values. They often have the word should in them, or they don't. They don't necessarily have the word should in it. So if I said something like, female workers deserve equal pay to male workers. Well, that's a normative statement. It's a statement of values. It can't be proven or disproven based on facts. It really has to do with where you come from in terms of your beliefs. and your values. So there are questions of equity, fairness with regard to economics, and we're going to talk about some of those issues as well in this course, but we're going to consider those normative. And we'll be making this distinction between the normative statements of values. When you think about the major principles, I mentioned resources should be used as efficiently as possible to achieve society's goals. Well, we actually can measure efficiency in a positive way. We can make a decision of whether a particular arrangement is efficient or not. But we can't determine from positive economics is what are society's goals. Society's goals becomes a normative idea, and so as we go through the course, we're going to see a little bit of the balance between the positive and the normative. Quite frankly, most of what we're going to be doing in this course is on the positive side. We're going to be talking about things that can either be either correct or not correct. But recognize that the normative is out there, and the big normative is, what are society's goals? As we try to construct these efficient mechanisms to achieve certain outcomes, what those outcomes should be is really a question of the values of society. And I think economics is very good at helping us understand how to get from here to there, where we need some input from other folks is what the there should be, and that's where those are the normative questions that we at least acknowledge and will somewhat discuss in this course, but mostly we're going to stick to the positive side. Well, I appreciate you watching this little video, and there will be another video with regard to the other subject, which is going to be the subject of the September 4th lecture. All right, thank you.